Poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, this is your host, Brad Wilson, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, and I am joined on Tactical Tuesday, like always, except for a few episodes there in the beginning, by Jon. Jon, how you doing, sir?
Doing well. Got some more 1K hands for the audience today, like usual. We didn't talk about the theme coming into this episode, but I think the theme should be whether or not to go for thin value on the river. Both of these hands, I definitely did have that, or did come to that decision. So yeah, we'll just, I guess, run through these two hands and see if you think I should have done anything differently on the river.
All right. I think there's possibly another theme, but we can talk about that, after we break down both of these hands on today's show. But yes, it's river opportunities. Should you be value betting? Should you not be? So yeah, let's dive in. This first one is blind versus blind. You've got a good hand, black aces. One might say the best hand in No Limit Texas Hold'em. The small blind opens 3x, and you 3x their 3x to 9 big blinds with aces, and villain calls. Looks to be a reg in the small blind, at least to, my knowledge. They have 100 big blinds. That's all I have to go off of there. So very limited data points, but would just assume that most villains at 1K and L are regs in general, I think. So no reason to believe otherwise. Flop is 5 of diamonds, 6 of hearts, jack of hearts. Again, you have 2 black aces. There's 180 in the pot. Both of you have 9-10 behind. Villain checks, and you start out by betting a third. I guess we'll start here on your decision to bet a third on this flop. Any other sizing choice available?
Not for me. I mean, I think you could go if you're a little bit deeper, or if you wanted to play a slightly different strategy, playing half pot here in position, I think is totally reasonable too. But I would be totally indifferent if someone told me I had to bet a third or I had to bet a half pot in this spot.
Sure. All right. So you bet your third. Villain calls a third, and we see a turn. The turn is the 5 of hearts, which pairs the bottom card and completes the front door flush. So flop was jack 5-6, 2 hearts. Turn is the 5 of hearts, and the villain checks, and you decide to bet, looks to be around 2/3. You bet 192 into 296. Tell me about this bet.
I do think this bet is definitely more I don't know, controversial, I guess, than the flop C bet.
Sus? Is that the
yeah. I think playing flush completing turns with a value that isn't a flush or a boat or a set or something is definitely a tricky part of the game tree. I think in general though, especially when I don't have a heart, I lean just towards value betting my hand, almost as if the flush hadn't completed. Don't think I get check raised here often enough by non-flushes to really, I don't know, be scared of getting check raised bluff here, off of a hand like aces.
So villain check jams and you're just folding?
Probably, which is pretty sick, but I don't know. I probably tell myself, oh, it's blind versus blind. I can call down a little lighter here. Maybe they have a few more bluffs. But in general, I think I would be pretty happy to fold a hand like aces that just is rarely going to improve on this board. And
I called Jon. There's no way that you're happy folding aces. That's too much. That's a step too far.
I mean, I happy in the sense that I know that I get to the spot with lots of hands that can't call. I just have flushes, and I guess in this case boats, and hands that have aces with a heart or something like that, that can like very easily or very comfortably call versus a jam. And so I don't know. I guess what I was saying by like happily folding aces meant that like just knowing that, I'm not folding everything in the spot.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, I don't know if folding aces is advisable here. Like,
Yeah.
villain could jam worse. Like that's the what makes it a problematic for me.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't exactly know how many combos of flushes they have, but some combos of their flushes start four betting pre-flop. So like
yeah. Sorry, I
they're
thought you were gonna
limited.
say check raise flop.
Well, both, right?
Yeah.
Like some four bet pre and then some check raise flop. So like there is some removal there. So I don't know how many flushes they have. But I think getting check raise here on the turn once you polarize is probably a low frequency event.
I agree.
Kind of either way. Like even if villain has like queen 10 of hearts, I don't know that they're just going to check jam facing this big bet, because like it's quite easy to imagine you just have a lot of air balls or bluffs that want to put the last bet in on the river. So like, yeah, I actually don't think you get check raise a ton here on the turn. So yeah, just even diving deep into like what you do versus a check raise is probably like much ado about nothing. Just such a rare thing to face. And villain does call, but that does sort of play into the river too, of like whether or not you should be going for value.
Yeah.
That villain does have slow plays here on the turn. Like they do have flushes.
Yeah.
It's not outside the realm of possibility. I mean, maybe they have boats too, I guess, like six is full, but not as many boats as flushes. The river is the king of clubs, and villain checks, and now your action, there's, the SPR is a little bit under 1. There's 681 in the pot. Villain has 659, and you have 659. So tell me about, tell me what you're thinking here on the river.
Yeah, I thought this decision was pretty close in game. I think now that like close between just jamming and going for value versus just checking back aces. It's a little bit tougher to get called by like some of the strongest hands on the flop and turn now. Like it's like tough for me to imagine like a hand like ace jack or queen jack or top pair on the flop and turn being like super happy about stacking off, or as happy about stacking off now as they would be on like an undercard river.
Why?
I don't know, like some of my bluffs are now have like just gotten there, like
yeah, you got to jam them, right? Like
on the river.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
if you have like ace king, you've got to like
right
both get there and jam them too, which I don't know that you jam king queen, ace king, king 10. So what I'm saying is I don't think the threat of a king is like a super scary threat. Like I just don't think it's like a super scary card.
Yeah. Okay, I can get on board with that. I guess like what I'm doing now is just like sort of explaining what was going through my head in game. And yeah, I just thought like once the king peeled on the river, I was like, oh man, it's like tougher to get called by like some of his jack X. Wasn't really thinking too hard about like the fact that maybe I don't jam some of my like naked king X hands that get to the river in this way. And then also, like you said, like it's not unreasonable for the small blind to check call flushes on the turn. And I obviously wouldn't expect them to fold any type of flush on the river. So yeah, I did decide to check back aces. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I think that like, I guess two things. Like firstly, yeah, I know you're describing your thought process like in game, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of why I'm like interjecting and like challenging each point of that thought process, right? So that like there are other things to think about here on the river in the future. And the fact that you check back aces actually does prove a little bit of my point that like the king is not ultra threatening because you've got to jam with your ace king and like you're checking back aces, right? So like you're not actually jamming ace king for value here on the river. So yeah, just think it's like important to really check the how threatening a card is as it relates to, you know, their calling threshold here. Like I think ace jack,
it looks like a scare card doesn't mean it actually is a scare card.
Well, yeah, and like because you polarize on the turn, like regs are smart enough to realize that like you polarize on the turn, so you're just going to have like good hands, like high equity hands, and then low equity hands. And so like the king may upgrade some of those low equity hands, but then you've also got to jam the king, which, you know, it would be quite thin, right? So like I just don't think it's like a major threat. So yeah, but with that said, I'm not sure, you know, to figure out this spot, we need to know how many combos of flushes they get to the river here with, and then how many hands they have to call your river bet with as well, right? To kind of see if jamming for value makes sense. Intuitively, it's close.
I mean, like, I think with the easier part of that kind of task to figure out whether we can jam this hand or not is like, what worse hands can we expect to get called by? Right.
Yeah.
And
I don't know the answer, right?
Yeah.
Like
King
it
Jack
just depends.
is like the only one.
Well, I mean, any jack, right? Like, I think that's kind of where you have to start is like any jack. Like, how many jacks does villain have, and then how often will they call the river on the king? And I don't really know the answer. You know, it depends. Like at what if you ask like different. If you ask me that question at different phases of my poker career, I'm likely to give you many different answers. I'm sure that like there are many phases where like I'm not folding a jack when you jam the river. Like I'm just not going to do it, right? Like, especially if they have like the ace of hearts, right? Like, or queen jack with the queen of hearts maybe also is probably just not going to fold. But then, you know, I know that there are lots of regs that can overfold in this spot as well and just fold a bunch of their jack X and not really think twice about it. So yeah, it just kind of depends on the human that you're battling against. And the population that you're battling against. So I don't hate the check back. I understand, like it makes a lot of sense. But I don't love it either. Like, you know, it's like, I don't hate it, but I don't love it. I don't know. It's just kind of tough to know whether or not you should be going for value here. I think if you have the ace of hearts, I don't know how much it changes. I mean, you do block some of the nut flushes, but I mean,
does that matter when they're never folding any flush?
Well, I think they raise some of their nut flushes on the flop too. So like, I don't know how much it moves the needle by blocking them. I think like, I guess the place that I'll land on here is you should probably be jamming, especially like in a loose formation versus a reg where like, you know, we could be 3-betting fairly light, and we've probably got a fair amount of like triples here that, you know, they could conceivably call down against. If it's a tighter formation, then maybe don't go for value. Maybe do. I'm not sure, but like, I just think that like you've told a story where villain can talk themselves into a call on the river with a jack. Okay. Given the current dynamic, I think in the pool that you play in.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would struggle to fold the jack on the river facing jam. So, I mean,
yeah, I think lots of people would. Like, I think just lots of players in the pool would. So, you know, ultimately, I think it's just a kind of a judgment call, and I don't think that like you missed out on crazy amounts of value here. But you know, tend to be fairly greedy by nature, so. Yeah, I probably just stick it in and hope for the best.
Yeah, that sounds crazy, but I understand. It's not as punty as it sounds.
I mean,
it sounds pretty punty. I just put the money in and hope I get some back like enough of the time.
I mean, philosophically speaking, right? Like,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah,
that what we do every time we value bet? Like, we put the money in and hope for the best. Like, unless you have the nuts on the
yeah,
river,
but sometimes
like,
usually when you're value betting, you have like some idea of like, okay, this is like the types of hands that I can reasonably expect to get called by that are worse than mine. Here we're like, I don't know if those hands call, so I'm just gonna put it
Well-
in and hope they can't find the fold with queen jack.
right. I think the point though is that like they have a high availability of hands that can potentially call that we beat,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like there's many of those types of hands. Whether they do or not, I'm not sure. But like at what percentage do they need to start calling versus, folding over folding those types of hands and then only calling with like flushes or boats, right? So like that's sort of, and I mean, if anybody out there thinks that like this is like an exact science, like you're just kind of out of your mind, right? Like we are putting the money in to the best of our ability. It's just a very close spot. And like, I tend to think that villains can hero call here and call more often with hands that aren't flushes. And the fact that they're going to 4-bet some and check raise the flop with some flushes means they don't have a ton of flushes to begin with here on the river. So like, yeah, just put it in and again, hope for the best.
Oh, like I spoiled. I did not do that. I checked back the river and got some bad news.
Yeah, they have a hand. They have like the perfect hand to call with, right?
Yeah.
Like this is just the perfect hand. So I don't even. I think this result is not ultra indicative one way or the other. But anyway, yeah, you check back and villain had the king jack with the king of hearts, which
The
is
result is, I don't know. It's meaningful to me, right? I'm like, I'm like, okay, like I learned a lesson today. There are like hands that are, there are more hands, or there are a decent number of hands that are gonna call a river bet, and you never give those hands a chance to call. Like you're never gonna, never getting the max on the spot, and you also, I guess, never really figure out people's thresholds for calling this river bet. Like I'm never gonna know if queen jack calls or not if I never jam, for example.
well, the only way to kind of gauge that is how you think about the spot. And you said yourself, like you would have problems folding a jack here on the river, right? Which, tells me that it's not a snap fold, right? There at some percentage of the time, you're going to call with your jack X. It's non-zero. Now, what that percentage is, I'm not exactly sure, but like that's the first indicator that like villain can call with worse,
Yeah.
Cool. So hand number 1 is in the books here. And hand number 2, we have another possible to value bet or not to value bet. That is the question. Stick around after the break.
In a world where a fish donk bets the flop, and you don't know what to do, one man
Coach Brad Wilson
has a surefire plan to neutralize flop leads and rip that dunk to shreds. Nuffle. Available now. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com/nuffle. Rated R.
All right, welcome back from the break. We got another hand here where going to see whether or not Jon goes for it or finds the value path in today's episode of Tactical Tuesday. So why don't we just dig right into the action?
So 200 big blinds deep cutoff versus button. I think the cutoff is likely a reg. He opens to $25. I 3-bet the ace king of spades on the button to 80. The cutoff 4 bets to 205. A little bit small given how deep we are. And I mean, it's a little bit small even if we were 100 big blinds deep. Definitely at this stack depth though, I'm probably not going to have a 5-bet range and just going to be calling all 4 bets. So ace king of spades is just going to go into a call bucket.
All right. So it's in the call bucket. We got to
Pretty good
flop,
flop.
that. Yeah, not bad. Not bad. I've seen worse. Ace of hearts, 7 of hearts, 5 of spades. So you flop top pair, top kicker with the backdoor nut flush draw.
Yep.
Villain bets quarter pot. Pretty anticipated sizing used by villain.
Yeah, nothing surprising here. I mean, I just can't imagine folding the flop or the turn.
Fold.
Probably not the river even at this point. So
Yeah,
We're along
the
for
flop.
the ride.
Yeah, I think folding the flop is I couldn't imagine that either unless like
I don't
you
mean you bet and then you paused as if you expected me to say
the
something.
the available option would be like if you're ever going to raise or just going to be calling, and I think
Yeah.
I don't think raising is advised, so calling is just the natural path. Now we get the tray of clubs. So ace of hearts, 7 of hearts, 5 of spades, tray of clubs. There's 635 in the pot, and we've got around 1,800 left. And the villain goes ahead and bets pretty close to exactly half pot.
Yeah. I don't know. Still same story on the flop. Can't imagine doing much else but calling. So just gonna call with this very, very strong hand.
Yeah. For the YouTube listener, you're gonna get your face in your frame, John. You're
Sorry.
you're like half in, half out. Act like you've done this before, man. Come on.
This is only my 50th episode. Sorry.
So yeah, again, like probably not going to be raising, I would imagine, facing this bet on the turn, setting up, it's not setting up exactly SPR under 1, but pretty close to having 1 bet left on the river, a little bit more than one bet left.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, again, don't think you're ever raising here, right?
Correct.
So the river is a queen, which promotes villain's ace queen to top 2 pair. There's 1267 in the pot, and our villain politely wraps the table with their knuckles and checks. Now the action is on you here to value bet or not to value bet. That is the question.
Yeah, so I can tell you in game, like what I was thinking was that the cutoffs range, once he goes bet check, is going to be comprised of like 2 types of hands. The first type is just going to be bluffs that have, for whatever reason, given up and don't want to put the rest of the money in on the river. Hands like missed heart draws or just some like random king jack, king 10 type hands that they use as 4-bet bluffs pre-flop. And then the value portion of their like bet check range is going to be like hands that are like so strong, have like the top of the board so locked up, hands like aces or ace queen that block a significant portion of my calling range and therefore like perform better as like check and bluff catch type hands and just let me bomb off my heart type hands or 8-6 of whatever, like just whatever bluffs that I have, given that they block the types of hands that they would expect me to call with. So I thought that given that those were the 2 types of hands they have and the neither of those groups of hands are going to call a value bet from me, I just decided to check back the river.
Yes, this was the theme of this show, by the way. The hidden theme within the theme of you being a terrible coward. Just a scared little baby here on the river checking back.
At least this time, I know that they can't have like the king jack or like the 2 pair that's like just a disaster to miss value from.
Yeah, so to me, there's 2 options, right? Like I think the first option is the one that you took, where you just kind of check back and see whether or not you won. And then the other option is betting small to induce. So betting small to give villain an opportunity to put the last bet in. There's 1267 in the pot. You have 1451 behind. So there is enough depth to bet small, like bet, quarter pot, I think. 310-ish, something like that. To give villain an opportunity to check raise with like their whatever hands that they bombed twice with, maybe like 8-9, or just some random cards, like just some.
Yeah, maybe he just has like
barrels,
king queen that like river showdown
king,
and now
queen,
decides
queen,
to like turn
jack.
itself.
Yeah, king queen, queen jack, queen 10, king jack, jack 10, like maybe Nah, once they bet the turn like half pot, it's kind of like I think we can eliminate like ace jack and ace 10. I think like it's just
I don't think those hands are getting 4-bet a lot anyways.
Right. So like it's hard for them to have like a worse ace.
Right.
And so like again, you know, we have to kind of analyze the threat of villain having strong hands here. And like the strong hands it could potentially check would be ace queen. And to be honest, like we don't even really know that ace queen bets the turn every time. Right? Like they may not bet the turn every time. They may.
No.
And then aces. And again, I think aces, there's only one combo. But I don't know that that one combo of aces makes it to the river here in this path every single time. Like they could.
What would you expect to do differently?
I mean, they could check the turn.
Yeah. Okay.
They could bet smaller on the turn.
Right.
Like, they could bet the river. Like they could bet small on the river. I mean,
Sure.
you know, there's just a lot of options that they have with that one combo of aces. So I don't know how viable the threat is of like how many combos villains make it here with that are better hands than ace king. They, you know, could clearly have ace king themselves, but they're not check raising the river with ace king. They're check raising with like aces, ace queen. I think ace 5 suited is an interesting one. I don't think ace 5 suited check raises all in on the river facing a bet. What do you think about ace 5 suited?
That'd be a close one. Maybe finds a check raise versus like the quarter pot on the river, thinking that I probably don't bet. You know, I'd probably just go bigger with my ace queen plus type hand. So maybe finds a check raise versus the small size. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's in general, it's just gonna ace 5 suit is just gonna be happy to check call, especially once the queen pair peels on the river.
Well, they're at the same, you know, inflection point, right? Where they've got to think to themselves once they face a small bet, like, do I get called by worse?
Yeah.
If I check raise jam.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can say like what would you do with ace 5 there?
Facing a small bet?
Yeah.
I'd be really tempted to jam. I'd have like trouble giving the in-position player credit for like finding a quarter pot with a set or ace queen and just think that like, okay, hopefully we can just get them to call off with like ace king or ace jack suited or something, thinking that they're bluff catching.
I think that's so much thinner than betting the river here with ace king. Like I think it's like, you know.
Yeah, it is definitely thinner, but I'm just, again, like I would just rely so much on the fact that I don't think that they find the quarter pot with top set or top 2.
Yeah. Well, given the 2 data points that we've seen in today's episode, I'm going to call that you're happy to jam the ace 5 here.
I'm not like jumping for joy like jamming the ace 5. Again, I think it's like a close spot. It's like jamming the aces. Like it's like you put it in and hope for the best.
Yeah, using that line, huh? Bringing that one back. Put it in, hope for the best. I'm less convinced about jamming with ace 5. Honestly, I would just call versus the small bet. I think. Yeah, just at this depth, I do think that like villain could bet small to induce and like will fold the hand. A lot of the hands that I beat, you know, like ace jack, ace 10, maybe ace king is kind of tough. Like we should have 7s here. We should have ace queen. You don't have a 5 betting range, so we should have aces too. I think that by the river, you've probably folded queens. Probably.
Yeah.
So we don't have queens. So anyway, it's close. Yeah, I would just bet small and like try to induce and then just kind of call all in with the ace king, thinking that like
you don't think other people are calling with the ace kings and the ace jacks? That's why you don't like. I mean, if you thought other people were going to play that way too, wouldn't you be pretty happy about jamming the ace 5?
I mean, I've learned through playing poker for quite a while that like just because I think about a hand in a certain way doesn't mean that everybody thinks about the hand in the same way, and like that's just like a lesson that gets beaten into your brain like over and over and over and over again through many reps. So like just because I think about this spot in that way, to me doesn't mean that like my opponent will think about the spot in the same way. So like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you. I just thought I'd ask.
No, I mean, it's good to challenge these things, right? Like, I think it's okay to challenge these things. But yeah, like if I had, so when I have top end value, right? Let's go into that, because like if I have ace queen, if I have a set of aces, if I have sevens, I take the same path. I bet small on the river to induce. Like, there's no way that I'm going for a big bet with aces when like we just block all the possible hands villain has to call. Like, the best way to make money in that spot is to let them put the last bet in with some of the lower equity hands that they make it to the river with.
Yeah, I think I mean, I think out of this whole episode of Tactical Tuesday, that's the thing that I will probably take away. And I think it's like most important for me to take away is like seeing that option on the river. Not only with a hand like ace king, but like even with like the super nutted hands, I think I generally just bet too large and don't even really think about like inducing from like the bottom of the range, basically.
Yeah, I mean, when you bet big, like you're targeting some hands in their range, right? Like hands that can call. Yeah. Whereas like the reality is they probably make it to the river with a fair amount of hands, and only very few of them can call. Right. So the only way to maximize value is by letting them put the last bet in. And so how do we go about letting them put the last bet in? We bet small to induce a river jam from those type of hands, right?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Try doing that, or try seeing that more often now.
Well, you check behind, and
the result.
Yeah, the result is villain had the queen nine of hearts. So I think you got kind of unlucky in a sense. Well, kind of unlucky in the sense that like villain river to pair, because I'm quite certain they're going to be bluffing this hand if they don't river a pair. But then I guess you did get kind of lucky in
it wasn't a heart.
Yeah. Fading the heart, that would have been kind of sad. So yeah, I think this hand is kind of in the category of hand that like is probably pretty happy turning itself into a bluff, by the way.
Right.
Like,
it's sort of the same thing as king queen, right? It's like,
yeah,
we rivered showdown, but I don't know if I can call. They probably have a lot of ace X when they bet this size, so I'm just gonna jam and hope they fold their ace jack some of the time.
Right. Because I block top two, which is like which is like the danger. You know, that's like the major fear here is that like villain has top two, and like when they have a queen, it seems like it makes sense to jam. But all right, thank you for listening to this episode of Tactical Tuesday. As I mentioned last week, if you want to hop in Greatness Village, go to greatnessvillage.com, join the community, post some hands, get in the mix, interact with me, John, and the rest of the villagers whose stories you've heard on the podcast. And what do we do?
Yeah, next week.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter. Join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter @CPG Podcast.